Come on down to Boost Mobile and turn your tax refund into 6 months of savings?
Nope, all wrong. You're on the radio touting Boost Mobile's 5G network. You gotta use your radio voice, like this. Come on down to Boost Mobile and get 6 months free when you buy 6 months on our best unlimited plans. Now you go.
This is just how my voice sounds.
Just say it like you mean it.
Okay.
Plus, enter to win up to $10,000 and double your tax refund.
Oh, my.
Requires upfront payment. Taxes and fees extra. Terms and exclusions apply. Visit boostmobile.com for full offer terms and sweeps details.
Okay, you guys, everyone wants to know, are you DTF? Down to farm, that is. That's right. Farmer Wants a Wife is back on Fox with 4 hot new farmers looking for the love of their lives. But are these ladies ready to take on farm life? And you know dating one woman has its challenges, but juggling 5? These farmers are gonna have their hands full. Don't miss the all-new season of Farmer Wants a Wife, Thursday on Fox.
Our faith is a living thing precisely because it walks hand in hand with doubt. If there was only certainty and no doubt, there would be no mystery, and therefore no need for faith. Let us pray that God will grant us a Pope who doubts.
Hello, guys, and welcome to another new episode of Hollywood Gold. I'm your host, Daniela Taplin Lundberg, and I'm here with Vanessa Mendal.
Hello.
We're about to dive into an amazing conversation with Glen Basner, who is the head of FilmNation and one of the true godfathers of independent film and foreign sales. You know, he EP'd both Anora and Conclave this year, and I'm just such a huge fan of his tastes and all the movies that FilmNation has allowed to come to the fore. So I'm so excited to get going.
Yeah, this is going to be a real education, I think, for the listeners that are in film school or don't really understand how this business works, or the people that I think are in the business and still don't fully understand, which is a lot of us. I think this will be really informative.
Yeah. I was even like, now, how does this work, Glenn? So let's get going.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Glen Basner, it is so good to see you. I have such fond memories. I probably have more fond memories of you than you of me, but I remember when we were making Beasts of No Nation, I don't know if you remember this, but you were one of the early believers in that project, and that was a movie that was very tough to get off the ground, and I remember you being a fan of it, and I always have a very warm place in my heart because I feel like you've really created this incredible company that seems to be based around the foreign sales model, but more than anything, you are a lover of film and filmmakers. We're going to talk about Conclave and we're going to talk about Anora, 2 movies that you got behind very early. I can't imagine the week you've had when you have 2 children in the Oscar race like this. But more than that, Glenn, I think your business, FilmNation, is something that sort of eludes many people in our business who are trying to produce and make movies. And so I kind of want you to sort of go back to the beginning a little bit and explain your process and what inspired you to start this company. And we won't, prolong that too much, but I think what you do is very elusive to some people. And you have created such a great business following great filmmakers, which is not always the case in foreign sales particularly. So kind of start from the beginning and I'll pepper you with questions and then we'll get into Conclave and Anora. And I won't make it too long, I promise, but I'm so excited to talk to you.
Well, thank you for all the kind words. I think the start of it was always I always kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit in me. My father was an entrepreneur. And so I kind of always had grown up imagining that one day I would try and start my own business.
Where were you from, Glenn? What was the origins?
Well, I was from Long Island. I grew up on, and my father had a business in the garment center, which was my first career selling ladies' hand knit sweaters.
Stop.
Which is the perfect segue into the movie business.
In Long Island or in the city?
The business was in the city in what used to be called the garment district, but now is not quite the same thing. So I always had that spirit, and for me, everything in sort of my career goes back to the start where I started out at a company called Good Machine. And Good Machine had sort of three principals, James Schamus, Ted Hope, and David Lindy. And they created an environment where everybody was challenged and encouraged to learn and take on responsibility and to express themselves through the work and also express themselves through their taste. And that was my formative experience and has kind of carried forward through to this day.
That was such a seminal place for so many great visionaries in our business right now. I mean, I know Bregman came out of there and Cujo came out of there, and so many people who have like continued to sort of, carry the flag for great filmmaking. And can I just ask you, because it really does fascinate me what James and Ted and David did there. Why was there just such this spirit of like, just go do it? What was it did you feel like they were creating?
They started the business when there was no independent film business. And so you only existed because you said you were going to exist. And there were no rules because you had no money. So you couldn't create any rules. And I think the story goes with Pushing Hands, where Ang Lee had come in and said, I'd like to make a low budget movie. And James or Ted or both of them said, we don't just make low budget movies, we make no budget movies. And I think that sort of spirit resonated throughout the company and throughout all of the people that were there, because there was no money. Nobody at that time was making any money. And it created a sort of like just place where everyone felt like you were in it together. And one of the important things to mention is that, I was taught by them and by Anthony Bregman and Mary Jane Skowski were there as well when I started. Everything was in service of the filmmaker's vision. And what that means to different people is not always the same thing, but that also is still a guiding principle. Because I don't think you can make a great film without great direction. And so everything, if you're aspiring to make great cinema, everything should be about how do you support that vision in the best possible way.
I love that. And there was like sort of a spirit of like nothing to lose, so no fear. Was that like a little bit of the of the ingredients?
I guess so, but I'd say it was more like a badge of honor. It was us against the world. Whether we were right or wrong, we believed we were right, and it made it very fun, and it made it very easy to make bold decisions.
So, Glenn, that was like 90s, like that was that era for you?
Mid 90s. The first I got introduced to them by a filmmaker, Edward Burns, who I call Eddie Burns.
Eddie Burns,
and
yeah.
Eddie is my childhood friend, and as a friend, I was just around watching over the year that he was making The Brothers McMullen.
Sure.
And he ended up at Good Machine, and he was starting his second movie, She's the One. And I was, as Ted Hope still reminds me today, a must hire for Ted.
Eddie Burns insisted that you get hired.
He encouraged Ted that I got hired. I would
strongly
say.
Encouraged. And so and we don't have to dwell on this, but like, what were you doing as a must hire, like early days with no film experience?
I started out as an intern in the production office working for Ted while he was making Walking and Talking and She's the One. Then I became his assistant. And so that's kind of how I started out. So cell phones existed, but almost nobody had them. There was no email. So there was a lot of photocopying, and I could still make a great cup of coffee.
Can you fix the Xerox machine? Like I became very good at that, fixing the Xerox when the paper got cut.
Indeed.
Okay. So Glenn, so you were there for how long? And then where'd you go?
Well, Good Machine was about 6 or 7 years. And then Good Machine became what's now Focus Features. And I was there for the first 3 years of Focus Features.
Okay. And then what prompted you to make a change? That's a long time.
Living in New York, there weren't many job opportunities. So it wasn't like I was getting job offers all the time. And I'd been there for a decade. And most of the time, really, David Lindy, I was working for him. And he I would credit as my most important career mentor outside of my father. But after 10 years, I felt like I was ready to sort of, test my own mettle and get out on my own a bit. And I got a job offer from the Weinsteins to go and as they were starting the Weinstein company to build out their international infrastructure. And so I went there.
Glen, had you been like cutting your teeth on the international side at Good Machine and Focus? So like, had that been your focus there?
I started out in production because there was no international. And then as international started to grow, I was doing production and business affairs. And again, with great mentors, they sort of gently tried to nudge me towards sales, which at first I resisted because I'd been working hard to move to become a producer at that point. But eventually I listened to them and tried it, and was one of those moments where literally day one, by the end of the day, I was like, I think I could do better here than what I was doing previously. So most of that time was done working for David and the international sales group.
So talk to me about like how this is like, I'm so fascinated about like how the international sales sort of market started to expand, and like what your observation was over those 10 years that like there was more focus on that.
Back at that time, home entertainment was really growing, fueled by DVD, and it was growing all over the world. And it was the start of pay TV channels starting to grow and proliferate around the world. So it was a great time.
Glen, you mean like HBO, like these channels that you'd have to pay extra for?
Exactly. But, every country having their own versions. So Sky in the UK, Canal Plus, and there used to be another company called TPS there. So that started to grow. And the appetite for American independent cinema was really strong because the sort of democratization of filmmaking hadn't yet fully started. Most countries didn't have that many like local independent films at that time. It's very different in today's world. So it made it a very exciting time. And for me, it was exciting because you're learning all about the world by conversing about movies. Well, why wouldn't this work in your territory? What is it culturally that's different?
Oh, interesting.
And so it was both learning from a career standpoint, but also expanding my horizons as a person and expanding my tastes in terms of seeing as you're going to film festivals around the world, getting introduced to filmmakers and films that may not get an actual release here in the US.
What were sort of like those cultural norms in like different countries, like this wouldn't work in France because of this, or this wouldn't work in China because of this?
I don't know. It's really hard to be reductive. So I'm always hesitant to answer, but I'll give one good story.
Okay.
It was my first day in Cannes ever. And we had a movie called Cherry Falls, which was a horror movie. And it was already clearly going to be a big seller for us. And I pitched our Israeli distributor as enthusiastically as I could, having no understanding of the marketplace. And very early was, the distributor kept trying to interrupt me, but I was in full on pitch mode. And then finally she let me know that horror movies at that time were not releasable in Israel. As she said, we don't need to go to the movies to see horror. Every day we walk outside of our doors and all we see is the horror. That was the direct quote from Nurit Shani.
But like you obviously did begin to like understand the world marketplace, right? As like one of the great sellers of our time, you kind of had to understand what your buyers wanted and what they responded to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really great way of learning about why you're choosing to make movies, because the market is very direct, very blunt, and it's very informative as to why something could possibly work, or who is the audience and how you'd reach them. And then digging down even deeper, what's the value of that audience and what's the cost to try and reach them? And not just theatrically, but in terms of where there's value in all of the ancillary ways that we monetize movies. And I'd say at first when I was learning, you think you're quickly becoming an expert and you don't realize that you have to take these blunt commentaries and then add nuance and sophistication to them, because there's maybe an impulse to be a little prescriptive. But in my experience and with the type of movies that we work on, the minute that the market is telling you to do something and you're listening in a very direct way, what you're really doing is repeating what's already happened and already been successful. And one, I don't think that's not interesting to me in terms of the films that we're making. We always want to make something that feels fresh and new and excites us personally. But the market is also demanding of that. So part of the learnings over the last 25 or so years is how do you take that information and how do you distill it down in a way that can be informative to filmmakers while not being prescriptive and having the humility to understand the difference.
That's like a big concept, right? Like you're taking in information from one side and then you're trying to figure out how to process it and communicate it to your filmmakers on this other side, and nary the twixt shall meet, right? Like you're often the conduit between these two, the market and the creative forces. And so I'm always so curious because the other thing I've always heard about the foreign market is it's like slightly behind the creative market, right? And sometimes the domestic market. And I want you to tell me whether that's true or not, first of all.
In some ways, things like kind of up and coming talent here in the US and in the industry, we're more knowledgeable and more willing to lean into that sort of thing. Whereas the independent buyers and distributors around the world maybe need to wait a beat longer before they can understand what value is being offered.
You know, even Conclave and Anora, talk to me about how you make those two movies and maybe take Anora as like our case study here, right? That isn't an obvious film. There are no major stars in that movie. That is like a purely filmmaker-based project that you obviously really believed in. But talk to me how you put something like that together. Do you do pre-sales? Is that something you just take a swing on? Like, just talk to me about that sort of arc of the process.
I think it's important to take a step back because it's not about any one film that we work on. It's we all have to deal with the realities of the marketplace because our job is to go sell these movies, or part of our job is. But for us, at least, we're making a creative choice, and it's an expression of our own taste and instincts. And it really starts there. And whether it's pre-sellable or not pre-sellable, whether it's obvious or not obvious, and most of our films are not, frankly, so obvious from a commercial standpoint, our job is to make our creative choice, back that filmmaker's vision, and then go do the work to make sense of it economically in terms of how you're going to get that movie financed, how you're going to get that movie seen by people around the world, because it's great to go and sell the film, but everyone works really hard on these films. You produce movies, so you understand how much real, like, blood, sweat, and tears hundreds of individuals put into these movies. And so there's a responsibility for us, not just to help get it financed or to finance it, but to actually get it seen by people around the world. And we take that very seriously. And I think one of the main reasons for a company like FilmNation to exist is to not be reductive and say the market's saying they need these kinds of movies with these kinds of stars. It's to bridge great creative vision with where the market can function and be successful. And in many cases, that means we have to lead the market to a destination that they may not understand, but we have to convince them of.
G'day, America. It's Tony and Ryan from the Tony and Ryan podcast from Down Under.
This episode is sponsored by Boost Mobile, the newest 5G network in the country.
These guys are no longer the prepaid wireless company you might remember. They've invested billions into building their own 5G towers across America, transforming the carrier into America's fourth major network alongside the other big dogs.
Yep, they're challenging the competitors by working harder and smarter, like this amazing new network they've literally built. They have blazing fast 5G and plans for all the latest devices. Visit your nearest Boost Mobile store or find them online at boostmobile.com.
I love ravioli.
Oh, tanta fame.
Since when do you speak Italian?
Since we partnered with SAP Concur. Their integrated travel and expense platform and breakthrough solutions with AI gave me time back to dive into our financial future. We expand into Europe in 2027, so I'm getting ready.
Well, you can predict the future?
I can predict you'll like that message.
What message? Oh, hey, we all got bonuses.
You can save for college now.
I don't have kids.
You don't say.
SAP Concur helps your business move forward faster. Learn more at concur.com.
Strap in. You're in the race with F1 TV Premium. See what the race director sees with Custom Multi-View. Watch every jaw-dropping moment in live 4K UHD. Across up to 6 screens, uninterrupted. Experience ultimate live immersion with F1 TV Premium. Available on selected devices.
If you want to defeat Tedesco...
This is a conclave, Aldo. It's not a war.
It is a war. And you have to commit to a side.
Glenn, I think it's only after years and years of success, right, that you as a market leader could probably say, guys, let's take a swing on this. There's no, Mark Wahlberg isn't starring in it, but I really believe in this film and this filmmaker, and I know that it will be successful, right? And, you probably have people who trust you because you have had such a track record of success, right? But I think to take a step back, because I think this podcast has become really sort of like a educational tool for so many people in the market that want to understand behind the curtain. I think I kind of want you to explain fundamentally how it works, like how the soup is made a little bit. And I know that probably seems like so pedantic or silly, but I really think it's like, Glenn, I'll go, and I know a little bit about foreign sales, and I'll go into many offices like of people who are highly experienced, who literally their eyes glaze over whenever you say the word foreign sales. Like they don't fundamentally understand like the equation or the journey.
I think Conclave is a great working example to kind of understand how it's done, but also one of the key purposes it serves, which is the kind of the underpinning of the financial architecture of getting your movie financed. So Conclave came to us from a UK-based production company called House Productions, and Tessa Ross and Juliet Howell run that company. And Tessa had acquired the book, developed the script, and attached Edward Berger, who started out after NYU Film School at Good Machine with us back in the day.
Great filmmaker. All's Quiet on the Western Front, like gorgeous filmmaker.
And All Quiet hadn't come out yet, actually, but I had known him for a long time, and he is a great filmmaker and has been for some time. And when we read the script, for me, it felt like a great entertaining movie for slightly older audiences, older than 35 on average. And it was clear to me that there was a lack of these types of movies. There were serious movies for that audience, but we felt, and I'm part of that demographic, sometimes we just want to go really be entertained as well. And it was kind of this really elevated whodunit set in this very secretive environment. And in talking with Tessa and Edward about the vision for the film, he articulated it in a way that maybe I hadn't read it right on the page. And what he talked about was things like the architecture of it and the style of it. And he referenced like Alan J. Pakula films. And he showed images of why it wouldn't feel like it was just a bunch of people talking in rooms, and why we'll have movement and what the sensation would feel like, because it's a thriller in a sense. And as I started to learn more about it, it just sort of really became the best version of what I felt was missing in the marketplace and an audience that I thought was underserved. So we came on board to finance the movie and to also produce with Tessa leading the charge, of course. And the next step for us was, well, how do you move into the sort of pre-sales model? And it started with casting. And together with Edward and Tessa, we started to talk about cast. And we went out and we made offers and we negotiated deals and brought on Ray Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, and Isabella Rossellini. So this was all in I'd say a 3-month period of getting them, locking down their deals and formulating what the timeline would be for production, which is always very helpful when we're going to sell the market.
There are certain actors who have create certain value. There are other actors who create less. Are you working with a general framework of a budget? Or are you sort of waiting to see who you land in order to lock in on a certain budget?
I'd say a little bit of both. We're working into a framework of the budget because the idea is we've now bought into Edward's vision for the film, and it costs a certain amount of money to achieve that vision. And so we had a sense of what that was, and the film had been budgeted out. And then it was about, well, part of realizing it is understanding the value of these actors. And so, these 4 actors all had value, and together as an ensemble, all had a tremendous amount of value. So it was part of I'm going to use a word that doesn't sound very creative, but it's part of the construction of what you're trying to do to achieve the creative goal of the filmmaker. And all alongside, it's not coming from the place where we're saying you have to cast these actors because they're the ones that give you enough money to make the movie. It starts from the creative conversation, and then we have conversations about, well, where does it need to go? Because I think the mistake is to say, this actor is a big star and has tremendous value international, but they may or may not be right for that role, or they may or may not have value for that actual audience that the movie's for. So again, we don't want to be reductive. We want to be nuanced, and we want to make sure that we're all working towards ultimately having a great film to, deliver to people around the world.
Once you sort of assemble your package, right, you decide to take it out at a certain market, whether that's Cannes or AFM or Berlin or any number of these like very large markets where all the international buyers come. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you're sort of, with your experience, saying, okay, I believe the value of this movie and this package and this filmmaker is in this range, right?
Correct.
Can you talk me through that, like that sort of market process a little bit?
Sure. I think one of the things about how we operate, and I think is a strength of our company, is, these days valuations change very quickly. And the fact that we have salespeople that are talking to people who are in the market directly, country by country around the world every single day, I think our understanding of how to achieve value and where to mine value is a great, powerful tool that we're able to use with filmmakers to get their movies made. And it's not as simple as saying, oh, I think I could sell it for this. It's much more sophisticated. You have to put yourselves in the shoes of a distributor and understand audience value, core audience, the audience value, the cost to get to that audience. Can you sell it in this territory, in television? Is there free television, et cetera, et cetera? Process of going to market is a fun one. It's really creative because there is a sort of like typical system where there's a rhythm where you're sending out scripts prior to going to see everybody a week or two later in the marketplace. But we really want to try and develop a strategy that is unique to that film and that gives distributors who are our customers around the world as much information as they can have to make the right decision for them. At the same time, we want to make sure that we're communicating from the filmmaker in a very clear and accurate fashion the film that they're trying to make. And there's different ways that we do that, presentational tools that we have. So we have our brochure, which is now all digital, that we create, which is giving a short synopsis, giving all of the basic, packaged elements available, and maybe giving some visual sensation of what we think the movie is. Maybe it's a cast photograph, or maybe it's something that's more imagistic. But we're also trying to find a way to bring distributors closer to the filmmaker. And so we're doing that with either in-person presentations, or we started during COVID where it was a necessity, but it's become quite a valuable tool, is what used to be called kind of rip reels or promo reels, is actually bringing the filmmaker into that process and allowing them in their own words to help narrate and articulate the film that they're trying to make, and then collaborate something with images to communicate a feeling, a sensation, a tone, or whatever makes most sense for that film. And these are really important tools because it allows the filmmaker to speak to people really directly. And it allows our buyers, it's when I'm selling a movie, it's not that I'm not accurate, but I'm a salesperson. And directors aren't salesperson, they're creators. And I think that if I'm a buyer, and I know from a lot of our customers around the world, they love to be able to have that proximity to the talent. They feel more secure in the information that they're receiving.
Glenn, do you ever bring directors like to the market and have them sell directly? Have you ever done that?
So we've done presentations to large audiences. Sometimes we tailor it to smaller audiences, and sometimes maybe we'll do some one-on-one meetings where some major territory distributors can sit and chat and ask the questions that they have to a filmmaker. Absolutely.
Your biography is extraordinary, truly. I've just, all the movies you've done, I've loved so much. Talk to me about a market you really remember, or a film that you really remember, and how like it may have surpassed your expectations. I always love hearing those stories just because it sort of articulates your process so well.
Well, I'll use a presentation, and I'm going to use it because it's a film we worked on, but the reality is it was more the filmmaker's presentation than anything we had to do. Maybe we handled the logistics and I became a sidekick, but we were engaged to help Tom Ford sell his last film, Nocturnal Animals. And he was going to come to Cannes and present to probably about 350 people in the room. And it was intimidating, but fun, because of course we couldn't just go and, we rented out the Ritz-Carlton Ballroom in Cannes, which is the nicest ballroom. But he had a person who worked with him. Everything had to be oversight because it's Tom Ford. He's got the best taste in the world.
It's like this is the guy who reinvented Gucci. Like, this guy is going to create a spectacle.
And he did. So the color of the chairs, the scent in the room, the presentation was all Tom Ford. And it was, literally having a front row seat to one of the most inventive and creative people in the world, and watching them talk about the movie that they had in their mind. And he also is super charming and maybe the greatest salesperson I've ever met in person. And it was really special event, and it was really exciting. And I walked away, not just feeling like the movie sold to focus for the world, which was great, but I walked away really learning a lot about actual salesmanship and presentation, just by looking, watching some of the choices that he would make. So that was a really fun moment.
Coming back to Conclave and taking it to market, what market did you guys take it? And tell me about that experience, just like as a test case.
We sold it in Cannes. We had created one of these presentational promo reels that Edward and Tessa actually was on camera as well. Had sort of narrated, we put together to give it sort of like a 3.5, 4 minute reel that people had a chance to hear from him directly. We had a great screenplay that just won the Academy Award for Peter Strawn. And yeah, it was really fun to talk about that film with distributors, because I think they also recognized, one, that Edward was this burgeoning, amazing talent. And they recognized that this audience was underserved. And this was something that could be really exciting for them to go and reach it starts out, you feel like it's a small independent movie, but I don't think any of us, including all of our distribution partners around the world, saw that. I think we all saw something that had real box office potential and that could be really entertaining, if at the same time really elevated and incredibly cinematic, and ultimately now noticed by the awards as well.
It's one of my favorite movies of the year, along with Anora. But did you make your deal with Focus for domestic rights there, or was that later on, or how did that all come together?
In that instance, we sold a significant amount of international. We did not have any offers from the U.S. distributors at that point, but we felt comfortable fully financing the movie, or financing the movie at that point. We actually brought in Indian Paintbrush, came on as our partners to co-finance the movie based on a relationship that Stephen Rails had with Ray Fiennes. But at that point, we had enough pre-sales that we were willing to take the risk on the remaining available territories, including the U.S.
Okay.
And go and finance the film.
So when you go and make those pre-sales, and they're very bankable pre-sales because you have like such an established company, and I think any bank in the world would probably loan on your pre-sales. Do you go and bank those, or do you just go find a partner who's going to cash flow what eventually is going to come in from the delivery of those to those territories?
Well, there's a combination of things. Initially, we cash flow from our own capital. We are investing equity into many of the movies that we're working on. And we have our own credit facility at Bank of America and MUFG. So the collateral, the pre-sales, we're able to, once we sign those contracts, put them into our credit facility to borrow money from the bank for them. The one thing that the bank will also lend it typically on is the tax incentive. And we shot the film in Italy and we posted in the UK. So we were able to get a fair amount of tax incentive money for the film as well.
And then when someone like Indian Paintbrush comes on, do they take certain territories, or do you guys just split everything sort of pro rata, or how does that like partnership work?
In this case, we just wanted to be real partners together, and we wanted all of our interests to be fully aligned. So the equity portion of the capital needed to make the movie, we split that 50-50.
Okay.
And that was really the risk against the unsold territories. And we were hand in hand with them, cash flowing that equity portion of the film.
And do you have certain partners that you work with over and over again, like Indian Paintbrush, or is it just like sort of movie to movie based on relationships with filmmakers and that kind of thing?
For films that we're producing and financing, we don't typically bring in partners.
Okay.
Indian Paintbrush is a company that I really respect. I really like their films. I had met Stephen Rails a handful of times and just found him to be smart and nice and had the same sort of like world vision of supporting filmmakers that we have. And I think it was just an opportunity to get to collaborate with them in a way that made sense. So, but we're not typically looking to bring on partners on our films. It's more opportunistic, like with Conclave. However, we also have a business where we're third-party sales agent, where we're not the producers and we're not the financiers of movies. And in that case, we get to work with a lot of different companies, both production companies and financiers that we work. And for the ones that we've had good experiences with, we love to continue those relationships with Seesaw, Element, Anthony Bregman, you mentioned before. These are folks that we know a long time, that we understand how great they are at making films, that we do our best to make sure that they want to come back and collaborate with us again.
This tax season at Boost Mobile, when you buy 6 months on our best unlimited plans, we will give you the next 6 months for free.
Plus, enter to win up to $10,000 and double your tax refund.
Your refund, your rules. Requires upfront payment. Taxes and fees extra. Terms and exclusions apply. Visit boostmobile.com for full offer terms and sweeps details.
Hey, Ryan, that was a fast trip. It was like you teleported.
Yeah, just got in. I'll get all my expenses logged, I promise.
Oh, no, you're okay. SAP Concur uses advanced AI, so your expense report will practically write itself. Quite the breakthrough. It's like we've been teleported into the future.
All right.
So, just curious, would you give us written permission to convert your matter into energy patterns and reassemble you at, say, random travel destinations?
Margaret, are you building a teleporter?
No. Yes.
SAP Concur helps your business move forward faster. Learn more at concur.com.
So you are still,
I am what God made me. And perhaps it is my difference that would make me more useful.
Just to finish off the Conclave narrative, where did you guys sell the domestic rights? When did you premiere it and then sell it at festival? Where did that go down?
The film was finished in October of 2023. So we didn't have the film to screen, and it was already too late for that year. So with every film, you're also trying to have a bespoke strategy of how you're best going to secure distribution. In this case, because we had the entirety of the calendar for the next year, we thought we were going to be able to screen the movie and give a distributor as much optionality in terms of release date and in terms of preparation for the campaign as possible. So we screened it outside of the market to U.S. distributors as a finished film, and Focus loved it and within a handful of days, we were excited to finalize a deal with them.
Did you screen it for each studio sort of individually, or did you bring them all into one large theater? Like, how did that process happen?
In this instance, we didn't want to bring everyone into one large theater because it's hard to get everybody's calendar set. And these days, there's multiple layers of decision makers at a lot of these companies. It's not the same as it was when I started out in the film business, where one person could see it and say yes. So we decided to schedule at their convenience, at their location, a screening for everyone so they could have as many people on their teams as they needed to inform their decision. It could be done at a convenient time, and they could see it privately and then be able to talk about it afterwards before we engage with them. But all within a compact period of time of essentially a week.
And did you feel like it was like happening very quickly, like you were getting the responses quickly that you guys had hoped for?
It never feels like it's happening very quickly, as you know, from having films being sold. It always happens like it's going too slowly. Because
but I'm always looking for the story that it happened like in 2 hours. It was great.
It did not happen in 2 hours. It doesn't often happen in 2 hours anymore, but it happened relatively quickly. And I think we knew early on the destination we were hoping to achieve based on the response that we had heard from people and how they talked about the film.
All right. So that was Conclave's process, which feels like a slightly more traditional, like foreign pre-sales. You get into production, you maybe hold back domestic or wait for the finished product. You get the film with the right partner, and then you're off to the races. And like literally has been so successful. Feels like it's made over 100 million worldwide, done very well, I assume, for you. Talk me through what feels like a slightly different process for Anora and how that came to be.
If you think about some of the things we talked about earlier, which is in a very bespoke manner, backing a filmmaker to allow them to give them the best environment or opportunity to create the most truest sense of the vision they have for that particular film. And Sean is a very specific filmmaker and operates in a very beautiful but unique way. And so there it was sort of like conversations around things about pre-sales don't quite match up with his process. So it's really more about just understanding what he wants to do and then finding solutions to allow that to happen. And so there were no pre-sales because he doesn't work into conditions that pre-sales maybe would make more sense of. And we needed to allow for him to have the freedom to make the movie exactly the way that he wants to make that particular film. And so I don't think it's necessarily the best working example of like modeling for everybody who's thinking about it, but I think it does communicate the sense of when you look at both of these films, and if we went through all the films in the slate, you'd see people always want to understand what foreign sales or international sales are or independent film models. But the reality is there is no model. It's an evolving thing. It's a living thing. What you want to do is just basically figure out how to enable something to exist in its purest form. And the fun of what we get to do, and the challenge of what we get to do, because the market happens to be incredibly challenging at the moment. I used the phrase before, that's our reason to exist. But I would just say our job, what we've done from the start of the company where we were only doing international sales, is we just keep adding tools to allow filmmakers to come on that they can pick and choose on any given film of which tools make sense. Steven Soderbergh, Magic Mike. There was no talk about production. There was no request for financing. I just want you to handle international sales. We'll take care of the rest. Fantastic. We want to be involved in that movie. That's how we have a relationship with that movie. If you need development money, if you need financing, if you need production help, whatever you need, and just because you need it on one movie doesn't mean you'll need the same tools on another. We're just here to offer up as many tools to basically attract and entice great filmmakers to come work with us. It's pretty simple when you think about it in those terms, but it's a great buffet. You go on a cruise and they have that huge buffet. You get to choose all of it, or you get to pick which dishes you like. That's how we approach it. Very service oriented.
Glenn, I'll say like my memory of the Alex Coco interview was that, you guys had lunch. Sean sort of talked to you about the notion, and it felt like in a consigliere way, you were sort of like guiding them to probably the right budget, which he announced as 6 million to, 20 million people are watching at the Oscars, as like probably the right framework for a movie to be able to have the freedom that Sean needs, right? Like Sean needs to be able to do what he's going to do and create the world he's going to create. And so is that accurate to say that you were sort of helpful in like creating the sort of, I don't want to say parameters, but like this is the world that makes sense in order for you to go do what you're going to go do?
I don't see it that way. I think Sean creates the parameters, and as a super fan of all of his films, I'm able to come up with solutions for him. And part of that is how much money you can responsibly have. But it's not coming from a position of market or risk or consigliere. It's how much does he need to achieve what he's looking to achieve? It really comes from him and Alex and Sammy Kwan. It really all comes from them. It doesn't come from me. I think consigliere sounds nice, but maybe it overstates. Maybe it overstates the role with Sean.
Okay. But you want to be a partner to him. You want to help a great filmmaker make the movies that go on to make impact. So that I'm going to give you a little bit of like props, Glenn.
All right. I'll take it.
But Glenn, your relationship with Sean Baker is so fascinating to me because it seems the first movie you worked on with him was Red Rocket. Is that true?
Yes.
And that is a tiny film shot during COVID. I mean, Alex told me a little bit about that process, but had you just been a fan of Florida Project? Like, what was it that made you sort of start this relationship with a movie like Red Rocket?
I mean, I'd seen, I think, 3 of his movies, maybe 4, before that had come to us. And one, I thought they were all great, but I also saw a filmmaker who was clearly challenging themselves to get better. And it was really at the height of COVID. And it was just an opportunity because it was like, I want to go make a movie. I know it's COVID. I want to make it responsibly. And this is how much I need. Had a lot of time home alone, and I love what I do. I want to be part of getting movies made. It felt like an impossible time to get movies made, and it was a pretty easy decision to say yes, because we got to say yes to a filmmaker like Sean Baker or a filmmaker to like Edward Berger. These are, at its core, they're easy decisions, even if the risk feels significant. And in that case, Red Rocket, the budget wasn't really like the risk. The risk was something can go wrong and the movie could never be finished. The risk was, how do you allow him to achieve the film? How do you help him to achieve the film in a way that's responsible? And I think the thing that's great about that core filmmaking team is they care about everybody that's involved in the process. It's not something they say to you. It's just how they treat you. And it doesn't matter who it is. And everyone performs different roles. If you look at the credits, you'll see the producers were doing craft service and everyone was doing all different jobs in a different way, but same spirit of like what I felt at Good Machine. They create this place where everybody is, this environment where everybody is valued. Everyone feels encouraged to do their best work and everyone feels appreciated. It's a really special feeling.
I know. I love that about them. And it feels like once you're part of that family, you just probably keep going. Like they've created something that really works and they're obviously doing it their own way and they just keep getting better and better. So I was so thrilled. I was so thrilled that Sean won 4 Oscars. Truly extraordinary. Blows your mind. Okay, so Glenn, 2 more things because this has been like amazing. I could talk with you all day. The first thing is like observationally for me it feels like there was a period in international sales where that like ruled the day. That was the way you got your films financed. And then for a while with the streamers coming in hard, and this is just from my perspective as like an independent filmmaker making movies, selling them at Sundance, that kind of thing. It felt like international sales, people were trying to hold back all their rights and just make one worldwide sale for a while. And now it feels, and maybe it's because me personally, I'm making bigger films again that are still like independently based, but it feels like international sales are coming back very strongly as a model. And I just want to know whether my experience and your experience match up at all, or if you're just like, yeah, baby, this is the way movies get made and the way they continue to get made.
I think in a general sense, what you're saying is accurate, but I think it's really more about where the market is. Everyone likes to feel like they're impacting the market. So they say, well, now we're going to do this or do that, but it's really reactionary. I think more than at any time in my career, the sophistication that you need to devise how to go to the market and come out with the best result. And the best result, again, is very bespoke. It depends on what that filmmaker is looking to achieve. It takes more time to think strategically. It takes an unbelievable amount of time in terms of understanding valuation and matching that up with creative. Presentationally, we need to be more communicative and informative than at any time. And I don't really look at it as, well, this strategy or that strategy is better. I just basically say, how do we create the conditions to allow for that maximum result? And we do that, by the way, with a lot of partners. So, for instance, we're collaborating with a lot of the US agencies who they may be handling the domestic or worldwide scenario while we're handling international and the independent scenario. And I think these collaborations have become really fruitful in servicing for agencies, servicing their clients, and for companies like FilmNation, servicing the films and the filmmakers themselves. And sometimes it may be best to hold back rights to sell later. But I think that's what people tell themselves when they can't pre-sell rights. Yeah. And our strategy is the valuation that we put on any movie in any given country around the world is if you think in testing, like excellent, very good, good, fair, poor is how people rate movies.
Yeah.
We price it out to the very good film value. People are paying for a very good film, which means if we deliver an excellent movie, they will do very, very well. If we deliver a very good movie, they will do well. But at a certain point, they will actually start losing money on that film. And so if someone hits our valuation, are we really going to hold out and not pre-sell that movie? I don't think that's really the responsible way to move forward. If you don't want to pre-sell the movie, then you shouldn't go to the market. You should just speculatively go make the film and then come sell it later. And that's how the strategy makes sense to me.
Brilliant. That's such a pearl, Glenn. What is your feeling? I mean, you're coming off of probably one of the most successful nights of your career. I have to assume having two major Oscar contenders who were, one of them was going to win, or that at least that was the speculation for Best Picture. Are you very hopeful and positive about the market, moving forward? I mean, it's like such a crazy political landscape. I can't imagine how that's impacting film if it is. But just give me your 5-year vision, if you have one.
I don't have a 5-year vision. So much changes in a year, much less 5 years. But here's what I'll tell you. Look at the last 2 years of movies. Look at how many independent companies and films have not just had great success at the box office, but unbelievably bold creative success. And I'm going to use movies that aren't ours. The Brutalist, an amazing movie. The Substance, I'm Still Here, Emilia Perez this year, along with Anora and Conclave. We had another film, Maria. We worked with Pablo Larraín, a movie that I love and is really amazing. And it was a brand new model of releasing films. It was Netflix in the US we sold it to, and we released it theatrically internationally. And it's going to be its highest grossing film ever, outgrossing Jackie in a few weeks. Think back to last year. With Oppenheimer and Barbie being great studio movies, there were still so many amazing movies. The Wim Wenders movie, Perfect Days, is one that comes to mind. Teacher's Lounge, this year, Seed of a Sacred Fig, All We Imagine is Light. And everything gets talked about in like everything is the same, like movies are just the same. But I see an unbelievable amount of creativity out there. And I know that there are distributors around the world who wake up every day and just want to be a part of releasing something that feels special and great. And that leads me to be very optimistic, not just about the future of independent film, but I also walk away from seeing all of these films inspired and emboldened to say, stop reading what we can't do, stop worrying about what the marketplace is telling us, and just go out there and trust our instincts and be bold and really aspire to make something that could be lasting. And the audiences are thanking us for that by showing up at the box office.
You seriously inspire me. You probably don't know how much, but I really believe that people like you who are in this business for the right reasons are the reason it's going to survive. And so keep going, man. I'm so happy for you. I'm so thrilled for your last week, let alone your last 10 years. And thank you so much for doing this. It was extraordinary. Great education. And I just love the movies you make. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. Nice to talk to you.
Bye, Glenn.
Bye-bye.
Hi, it's Eugenio Derbez. Did you know that with Boost Mobile, you can cut your phone bill in half this tax season? Yes, half. Buy 6 months of service and get 6 months free. That's a full year of service paying half. That sounds good, doesn't it? And all on the Boost network with 99% nationwide coverage. Don't wait. Visit your Boost store today.
Requires upfront payment, taxes, and fees extra. Terms and exclusions apply. Visit boostmobile.com for full terms.
You know, Vanessa, it's so funny. It's like, I think the loyal listeners wouldn't realize, but like to me, Glen Basner is just one of the greats of our industry, and he isn't like a celebrity or a filmmaker, so it's like hard to understand. But he's one of these people who has allowed some of the great films of our time to happen. And so for me, that was like so cool just to like dig into his brilliant brain and understand it all.
Yeah, I mean, if you go on his IMDb and you just scroll through, it's just like there's 40 plus amazing movies, and you just go through and be like, wow, I love that one. I love that one. It's kind of unbelievable how many projects he's been a part of.
Well, also, like when you're in the marketplace as a producer with a project and you're trying to sort of go around to the foreign sales game, if Glen wants to do your movie, it gives it such a seal of approval. I don't know what else to compare it to, but it's just like a high mark of taste. And so it's pretty incredible when you get the call that FilmNation likes your script.
Yeah. It was even cool listening to him talk about how when he's kind of rating movies and how like the markets are going to respond to them, he's rating them based on the quality. And I don't think I've ever heard of a financier, not to put shame on the other financiers we work with, but I've never heard of a financier who legitimately cares about quality and like status of a filmmaker and making something feel prestigious or important or culturally impactful. I think that is such a fascinating metric that we don't hear about enough. So that was actually really incredible.
Well, it's so true because a lot of times when we're putting movies together, we have to talk about cast and value of cast. It becomes sort of the fallback discussion about what your budget's ultimately going to be based on the value of the actors you can attach. And it becomes such a tricky rabbit hole because then you end up moving farther and farther away from the creative discussion of what the film should be, right? You know, I mentioned this in my interview with Glen, but I'll never forget that Glen was such a huge fan of Cary Fukunaga, the filmmaker that we made Beasts of No Nation with. And he was the one who sort of sat down with us very initially. They didn't end up being involved, but, you know, Beasts of No Nation is a movie about child soldiers. There, you know, that is not like a high concept that you can go sell easily, you know, like an action film or a horror film. And he just believed in the vision of the filmmaker. And I just never forgot that because it is a really unusual approach for foreign sales or a business that's based around foreign sales. And so I love that. He's obviously filmmaker first, Sean Baker being like such a great example of that. You know, Sean Baker doesn't have stars in his movies. That's not the way he puts together his films. And yet they're just incredible worlds that he creates, you know? And so anyways, that was very cool.
Yeah. And I do think it is often really easy. And I understand why foreign sales is all built around recognizable faces, because that is just what gets people in theaters. And that's how I can explain to my parents or friends what
right.
Well, this is a Tom Cruise movie. Like it's a very easy way to get people to understand it. So I think to take on that challenge and just be like, I know the kinds of movies Sean Baker makes. I know what Red Rocket looks like. I know what the Florida Project looks like. Therefore, I can assume Anora will kind of fall in that universe, and just trusting that is really incredible.
By the way, I was in LA last week and I went to the Academy, had all the producers up, you know, sort of talking briefly about each of their films. And when Conclave got up, first of all, Fiona, the producer he was talking to about is so incredibly charming in English, just like has a clever turn of phrase. Like you lean in as soon as she starts talking. And like, I was like, oh, that was smart of them to put her on the reel because she's just like a charming English woman, you know, who's pretty funny, which is always like the ideal combo, you know?
Yeah. Just a really ideal salesperson, just really delivers.
They basically recreated the Sistine Chapel and that entire thing. They rebuilt it all at Cinecittà, which is like the famous Italian studio. And they talked about basically creating that entire, you know, environment for a Conclave. And you've seen the movie, but like that bedroom, you know, that they all, it's one bedroom and they just kept switching the set dressing.
Oh.
Yeah, because like they couldn't create like 20 bedrooms. So it was just like one bedroom that they kept redressing. And it wasn't that hard because they were all just visiting. But I thought that was so interesting.
That's a wild fun fact. Now that you say, I mean, it all had to kind of look the same because it was supposed to look,
they're like dormitories, you know?
Yeah.
It's like a high class prison. Yeah.
And they can't really have like so many items because they're such pure holy people.
Exactly.
It's very interesting.
So I thought that was so cool.
That's really cool.
All right, guys. Well, that was another fun one. Slightly different, but I thought that was like a unique perspective that we should give to our loyal listeners. All right, Babel, you do the wrap up.
All right. Follow us on Instagram, guys. Hollywood Gold Pod. Subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Get your merch on our website, staygoldfeatures.com. We're going to be uploading some new designs soon, and hit that merch tab and get yourself some sweatshirts. So,
are we doing new designs? That's exciting. I love that.
I was thinking about it. I was like, I'm just going to put some new designs on.
That's how we do over here, guys. How we do. All right, guys. And don't forget
it's a new year.
Stay gold.
Stay gold.